see a project, see a business, see a model that you have, something that you're working on, and think about, how can I make this leaner, right? How can I lean this out? Question number one, it's going to start to instigate this whole thought process in your head. You're going to start to see redundancies, and it's like it's like a kickstart, right? Like for a different perspective on how to lean things out. So you focus on that for a minute.
Rafael, thank you for joining me for our Thought Leader Spotlight series. I'm your host, Matt Camp here, head of partnerships over at Deal Machine. And on these, we really like to shine a spotlight on industry experts like yourself. Really hear your inspiring stories, educate our audience on the lessons that you've learned over the years. So today, really excited to welcome on Rafael Cortez. You're known as the business systems guy. You've been in real estate since 2009. You're organizational psychologist. So want to deep dive into that. I'd love to hear about that. And then you own multiple companies in the space. So you've got your own fix and flip, wholesaling business in Phoenix. You've got a real estate brokerage, and then you also are a real estate coach. So you've got your education company with everything from podcasts, courses. You're on YouTube with our friend Brent all the time. You've got your Instagram. So you've got a lot going on, man. Thanks for taking time out.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure being here. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So to kind of begin with, I know, I'd love to hear more about your real estate investing journey, how you got started. Just can you kind of tell us, what brought you to here today?
So I started in 2009. I was coming from a different industry altogether. So my first business I launched was a non-emergency medical transportation business, and I mean, transportation, logistics, and all that stuff gets really, really crazy. So I wanted to invest somewhere else outside of that business, and I started looking at real estate. I did a couple of flips, 2009, 2010. So that's kind of how I got my feet wet. I just, there was a lot of stuff I didn't know back then, and eventually I made it over to wholesaling. I started seeing on the settlement statements assignment fees and that sort of thing. It's like, what is this thing? What am I paying $18,000 for? And I mean, it wasn't clarified. And then I ended up talking to the wholesaler. He kind of broke it down for me, which was really cool. Like, I wasn't mad. I was just like, I was amazed at the opportunity. And then I was like, you know what? I'd rather, focus on this side of the business, and have a shot at wholesaling stuff than doing the flips and the flips and flipping that I was doing at the time. So anyways, that's how it got started. 2009, I did a few deals there, wholesaling. Then I sold my business, the transportation business, and I ended up working. Sean Terry sent out an email. He was looking for an acquisitions guy, and I wanted to learn, right? I wanted to get like really bathed in the industry and learn from the best. And I was following Sean for a while before that. So he sends this out. I ended up asking to myself, like, if I'm going to go work for anybody, and I hadn't worked for anybody else like in the last, call it 9 years. So it was kind of like one of those things. Am I making a step backwards here, or is it something that's going to push me and propel me? It's like really like that arrow effect, where you get the bow and arrow, and then you pull it back, right? You feel like you're walking backwards, but you're really not. So anyways, I go in there, I start getting exposed to a ton of seller appointments, dial in my conversations, negotiation, figure out how to work the business all together. And my background is business development, through organizational psychology. So I started playing with systems, processes, and KPIs and whatnot. Next thing you know, I mean, I spent 3 years there with Sean, did really good. We parted ways, and I continued on. I continue wholesaling and doing my thing. So I've been at it since 2009 and just about, every aspect of the wholesaling space. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the imagery of like the bow and arrow, like you said, where you're kind of, cocking back, you're walking back to be then sprung forward. Right. So and during those years, like during that kind of 3-year stint with Sean like that, what are some of the main things you walked away there? Like what are some of the things for our audience today? Like, I know sales and negotiation and, setting up processes, those are all things that they're thinking about right now. So if you can maybe share a few words of wisdom from that, that'd be great.
So systems are good. They'll eventually give you freedom and whatnot, but it's important not to get caught up in the having the right CRM, the right everything dialed into 100% before you actually take action. To me, one of the biggest lessons was even in a business like that. I mean, it was rocky. It really was. Every week would come down, we'd come back to the drawing board during the meetings, and break stuff down, like what happened last week, how can we, what are the KPIs, and we kept tracking all that stuff. But none of that matters if you're not having the massive action behind it, right? Which was the big thing. I was going on a lot of appointments. I wasn't used to rejection. My first career was a firefighter, right? So firefighters show up. Everybody likes firefighters. Nobody has beef with firefighters. Cops, different story. But firefighters, like, you're always, welcome. So I wasn't sure, I wasn't used to that pushback, and I started going on seller appointments and making calls and doing, negotiation, and you get a lot of rejection there. So to me, that was one of the things that I had to wrap my head around. Like, it's part of the business, kind of build my mindset into it, get more proficient with my conversations, understanding the overall process, and how to explain it to sellers was a big thing. So a lot of that, I mean, just it really came down to repetition. So I made an intentional effort every single time I went on a seller appointment to, okay, what's happening right now? Like, what are we doing? What am I going to walk away with as a lesson from this, the seller appointment? And then I would debrief that. Like, every single appointment, I would sit there for a couple of minutes after the fact, and then ask myself, what went right, what went wrong, and then do more of the stuff that went right, and then cut the other stuff out, that sort of thing. So repetition was a huge thing for that learning curve to get, a lot shorter.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you saying like, hey, building a process is a process in itself. You're like, you're always evolving. And I love how you're sitting down and reflecting and being able to always get better from every conversation. I think that's one thing we really help, people try to realize as well is taking action is really like the bottom line, commonality among everyone who's been successful in this, is that, you don't feel like you need to know everything. You don't feel like you need the perfect process, because when you take action, at some point that process is going to be ripped up. At some point, like, you're going to realize you aren't fully prepared for everything. And like, you're going to learn from those reps and from getting out there and from improving over time. So,
and everything's different. Really, what like the big learning is not the scripts. It's the adaptability of it. Understanding that you're gonna have to move along, the currents as you go through a deal, as you go through a conversation. Sometimes we have to shift on different aspects of the business, right? Recently, as of June 15, call it. Everything got crazy in our market and close to December. So a lot of the emphasis shifted from the sellers to the buyers. Like, people are having issues on the buyer side, and I think taking that principle across the board, right? Having the ability to adapt is huge, and you start adapting in conversations and the smaller things like that, and then you can kind of compound and scale that as you progress and actually build a business.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. Love that mindset. One thing I know you touched on it here, and this is something that I think would be super useful for our audience, just seller communication in general, which is so important to be able to easily explain the process to people. Can you maybe walk through that for our audience too, of like how you would have a conversation with a seller, how you would explain that process really clearly and easily? I just think our audience would really like that as well.
Yeah. So I can give you, I'll give you the kind of like the skeleton structure of the way that I process conversations, and my team does, right? We on the sourcing side, there's different stages to a conversation. First off, you're going to source a seller, and all that is gauging for interest. It's a very short, basic conversation. Are you interested in an offer on so and so property? The way that you get to that seller, it's going to vary, right? They're going to come at you from, cold calling, from driving for dollars, using, deal machine and systems like that, right? But you have to put yourself in front of them and engage for interest. That's the first thing. So it's not this big, fat, elaborate script that you're going, into right away, because it's just going to waste your time. So you're plowing through that initial portion of the conversation. The second thing is think about pre-qualifying your sellers. Now that you have interest, maybe they want $1 million for a $300,000 property, right? It's not necessarily somebody who we're going to do business with. So you pre-qualify the sellers, and for this we go back to simple principles: condition, timeline, motivation, and price. To us, if we have 2 out of 4 in my company, we have 2 out of 4. 2 of those, we have, say that the condition is beat up and then the timeline matches. We'll push it over to acquisitions and then start a discovery conversation. So you go from interest to pre-qualification to discovery. And that discovery conversation is more organic. You have to understand rebuttals. You have to understand, okay, but what to answer, right, to certain things. But it's not a robotic, scripted type of conversation. There has to be that human element behind it. This is where rapport, right, really gets built, where you make that connection. And it's not about selling or convincing. It's really about finding out what the real problem is. They come to us, wholesalers, because they're not, for some reason, they're considering us instead of going to the retail market. What is that reason, right? Is it because they're getting relocated? Is it because they have, a ton of, I don't know, we get hoarder houses on a regular basis. They're embarrassed. People don't want people walking through these properties, so they rather talk to one person than go through the MLS and have people walk through the property. They're overwhelmed. They don't have, they have no idea how to clear it up or clean it up and make it market ready, that sort of thing. So there's going to be a lot of things that play into it. But on that discovery conversation, it's really about finding out what that problem is and how we can solve it. Our thing as wholesalers, our superpower has to be solving problems. That's what we are. We're the fixers. And understanding, that a conversation flows that way, it kind of becomes organic, right? Like, you don't spend too much time with people who, they're not going to end up doing business with you. You're able to pre-qualify leads and understand kind of where you're at, based on an established structure. But then you also don't lose that element of humanness to it. People want to have that, that connection to feel like they're not talking to a computer or a script, right? They don't want to feel like they're being sold. And that's the thing, when you're going through this discovery conversation, it's not about selling them on you. It's about finding out what the problem is so you can come in and fix it, help them out, and then make a profit out of that as well. So, and then from that point forward, the last section, of course, is the negotiation, which is really, once everything else is settled, just coming to terms on a price point. But it's a progressive movement throughout that conversation. So to recap, I guess, the way that I break down our conversations is, sourcing, pre-qualifying, discovery conversation, and then negotiation. So,
love that. Yeah. I mean, I think in general, having that problem solver mindset, that is huge. I mean, going into it, like you said, you're not trying to sell them, you're trying to discover their issue and be able to solve that problem for them. And I think, now more than ever, you talked about the market, now more than ever, like, we have more opportunities to do that, to find people who have financial problems that we can solve. I think as well, like, one thing that Brent has talked about, Brent Daniels, I know you're on with him every week, on their live stream as well.
He's a good friend.
Love that he talks about, hey, we're not a deal maker. We're not selling people. We're a deal finder. We're trying to discover motivation rather than sell to somebody who doesn't want to move, so.
Another thing that comes along with that repetition is the ability to realize, like, okay, what's going on? There's distress, right? But it's not only physical distress. You have financial distress. You have circumstantial distress. You have, sometimes people are in dire distress, but you can't see it because the house is decent, the house is clean, the house is well kept. But there's something else going on. You can't see that stuff from the curve, right? You have to actually engage. You have to actually get in front of people, and then go through this effort of discovery. I mean, it's very, very important. I mean, that's really the basis of the whole thing. It's crazy. We don't open our mouths. We don't make money.
Right. Yeah. And being a great listener, like you said. I mean, I think one thing, and a lot of this does tie into this, but one thing I found super interesting was your background in kind of the organizational psychology, being organizational, really a business psychologist in the end. Can you talk through, like, what got you into that, how you found it applying to real estate, how that's been made useful in your real estate career?
So I launched my first business when I was 21 years old. I was still working at the fire department. And I mean, I didn't know anything about business. So I went to the Small Business Administration. I started looking for templates on business plans and just kind of digging, my way through the knowledge branches and whatnot. And I came across a few people that did help me, but I had a lot of questions. And so I was like, all right, cool. I guess I'm going to go back to school. And by then I had already launched the business with so many mistakes. I paid a lot of dumb tax and that sort of thing. It's pretty common for bootstrap businesses, especially for people who are like me, and they're like, no, I know what I'm doing. I got this. And then they decide to not, cut the curve or listen to better advice than what we have in our heads. That was me back then. So anyways, a lot of questions. And I went back to school. I got a bachelor's in business administration and servant leadership. And I was having a conversation with a counselor. She goes, what else do you like? You already have the business and you have the bachelor, so you don't necessarily need a degree. Like, I wasn't needing, a degree to get hired or anything. So it's like, all right, cool. I'm going to look into something that I'm, intrigued and I actually enjoy. And psychology has always been one of those things, like favorite subject in high school and that sort of thing, right? I was like, all right, I'm gonna get a master's degree in psychology, general psychology. So I went through that, and right before I wrapped up, it was like halfway through my last semester, I think, I discovered that they had organizational psychology. It was like, crap, I should have gone with that. Like, it's in what it is, it's the understanding of people and systems, right? By that point, I had to get systematic because my original business was transportation. There's no way to run a transportation business if you're all over the place, right? So that kind of forced me to clear up my process, understand what to track and that sort of thing. And I brought that into the wholesaling, the real estate space. So I decided to go for a second master's degree in organizational psychology, and that's kind of how I ended up. But the cool thing about it was, like, I would learn something like principles or something in class, and then I would go apply it in my business the next day. So it became one of those things that, as I was learning, I was applying as well, learning and applying, instruction and action, really what it came down to. So it did help me a lot. And now I use that. I use the same principles and all that stuff for coaching, consulting, and the way that I build my businesses and processes, plays into that as well. So yeah, it's just kind of one of those things that I was lucky enough to have a conversation. Somebody planted the seed, and then they just grew.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, is that something that you think separates you on the business, on the real estate coaching side? Like, does that affect your approach and make you unique in that way?
Absolutely. And not to say that you need degrees to be a good coach, or experience will be all you need in a lot of the cases, right? To me, what it does is just gives me a different perspective on problem solving, on approaching things, right? Besides that, the bootstrap, way of doing business. But it does. It really does play a big part in the way that you're going to automate the business. You're going to start to delegate. One of the big things that I believe in is that hustle is a season, right? We all start hustling at the beginning. We have this hustle season that we go through, but it's really not. It's not a business strategy. You can't hustle forever. It's not sustainable. So hustle is a season. It's not a business strategy. You have to figure out how to think like an entrepreneur and get out of that hustler mindset. As you go through the process of building the business, you gain experience. Again, you get instruction and action, and then this evolution within yourself starts to happen. So I think having just background in that space, right? Now, there's no question that I can hustle through things, but I've learned that I can do a lot more, a lot better, if I apply myself and actually, approach it in a more of a systematic way when it comes to results. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, speaking of kind of, your coaching approach, and then also the systematic, building systems in your real estate business in general, I know you're launching that wholesaling fast track masterclass, and thanks for the shout out to us in there too. Really appreciate that. But, I know within that, you really help people think about, their wholesaling business and the systems that they need to build around that. Can you maybe break down that kind of L.E.S.S acronym that you use and really do a deep dive on, hey, here's how to be thinking about your wholesaling business?
Yeah. So the L.E.S.S, I call it, I came up with the less business, more profits model, right? In my head, it's sexy, it's catchy. And L.E.S.S meaning lean, effective, strategic, and simple. It's an acronym. So the word less is it's an acronym for that. So lean, effective, strategic, and simple. And it's really how I approach anything that I tackle now. If I'm looking at even a flip, man, I mean, you can bring those principles over to a flip. But if you can see a project, see a business, see a model that you have, something that you're working on, and think about how can I make this leaner, right? How can I lean this out? Question number one, it's going to start to instigate this whole thought process in your head. You're going to start to see redundancies, and it's like it's like a kickstart, right? Like for a different perspective on how to lean things out. So you focus on that for a minute. Then you want to make sure that it's effective. Like anything that you're leaning out and anything that you still have in place, make sure that it's effective, right? Not necessarily efficiency and effectiveness, two totally different things. You can be very efficient at stacking, I don't know, paper clips, but is it really going to be effective to the bottom line, right? So to me, is having that clarity over effectiveness, and making sure that you have that within your business. Strategic. Everything that you're doing in your business has a purpose. Every action, every stage, every KPI. You don't just have bulk, tracking for the sake of tracking. Everything's strategic, right? Again, that's going to feed the leanness of the business. And then simple. If you can't make something simple enough so your team can use it, they're not going to use it. So that's why you have these, a lot of, great companies and whatnot, but you have, they're so robust that, the reports are failing. You need trainings for the trainings of the trainings, and it becomes so heavy. So that what happens, the team just checks out. And then, performance starts to dwindle and all that stuff. So lean, effective, strategic, and simple. If you can bring that, and I brought that into I built that into my wholesaling business. I actually broke it down into 6 stages. But it covers the 4 elements, right? It's lean, it's effective, it's strategic, it's simple. And I think, I mean, it's that was a game changer for me when I started thinking about business that way. So
love it, man. Yeah. I mean, I think especially that effective piece, like that's something that I think a lot of people might struggle with from that hustler mindset into the entrepreneur mindset of how do you scale something or how do you step out of something and keep it effective and actually not lose quality, not lose the execution of it. Do you have any tips there for people to overcome that or to make that transition and help them, be able to build a business that stays effective?
The first one would be to reverse engineer. So there's going to be a couple things. First one is going to be reverse engineer your goal. Whatever goal you have, keep it in front of you 24/7. I mean, right now, if I look to my left, I have this focus board. Next to it says targets. And I'll write out targets on a monthly basis. This is what I want to hit this month. This is kind of like the guiding beacon, right, for me. But you have to reverse engineer with that, what that's going to require. So I don't know, say that you want to make $50,000 in sales, right? Okay. What does that look like? The effectiveness factor comes, it's gonna almost present itself because you start thinking from the end, right? Like if I have $50,000, what happened right before then? Oh, well, I had to have, I don't know, 50 clients because each one pays me $1,000. Okay. To get 50 clients, what happened before? Well, I had to have this marketing campaign and this product and this thing and this thing and this thing, right? So you reverse engineer the whole thing to the beginning, to the point of inception from where you get the client through the door, right? And then you have this whole timeline of what's happening along the way. Now, when you have that picture and when you have that level of clarity on what's required to make something happen, then you can get crafty. And all right, you know what? This is a redundancy. That's the second part, right? Eliminating redundancies. Okay, what am I doing twice? What can I combine? What can I, knock out, I don't know, at a different stage of the project so I don't have to worry about it 3 times, and that sort of thing. I like to keep things in linear fashion, and not, having to jump back and forth when I'm looking at the I love the whole conveyor belt, a model, right? It's hard to do sometimes depending on what industry you're in. But if you keep things in linear fashion, that actually plays very well to the way our brains work. Right. So you don't have to adapt too much. There's not so much confusion. There's a lot more accountability because you know exactly what part of the process you're in. So it'd be 1, thinking from the end, reverse engineer whatever you're building. 2, figure out what the redundancies are, and then make it linear so you have that level of accountability and clarity of where you're headed. Mix those three, man, you have something that's effective.
Yeah, that's super powerful. I love thinking about it in that, like you said, conveyor belt, fashion. And then going one step further too, like on the delegation side, like how do you, automate things? How do you delegate things? How do you remove things from your plate to be more efficient while keeping the effectiveness? Do you have any thoughts there of how you go through that process and understand this is something that I can delegate, or, oh, I should keep this is on my plate?
So figure out what the roles are, and this is more on the business design type of aspect, right? And then you're gonna have roles, you're gonna have responsibilities. You think of them as like different hats, right? But what roles are you covering? And it doesn't matter. Like one of the things that I come across with students quite a bit is like, oh, I don't have a team of 3 people or 4 people or 5 people. I don't have to worry about, what lead generation, department is doing, what acquisitions, like that's wrong. You have to think of things that way, because even if you're a solo operation, you still have to understand what part of the transition you're in, right? So if you segment, for example, I have 6 stages in my wholesaling business. Stage 1 is sourcing. Stage 2 is converting. Stage 3 is acquisitions. Stage 4 is dispositions. 5 is measuring, and 6 is improving. So those 6 stages across the board, and there's actions that kind of fall underneath each one of those.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is when you figure out what your stages are within your business, like you can start delegating that particular stage. So one thing that I see, often happen is like people will hire a really good acquisitions rep, bring them on board, train them and everything, and then have them cold call. Like, no, that's like you're wasting that. You're putting strain on that talent of closing, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. You wanna delegate a different portion of that particular responsibility, because their talent is in actually negotiating, discovering, and getting signatures on the contract, which is very different than, for example, the what you need for cold calling. You know what I mean? So it's mm-hmm. I think it's a lot of it, again, comes back to clarity. What exactly are you delegating? And is that one single task? When you delegate, make sure that you're delegating with accountability, not just, hey, listen, I'm going to give you 1,000 records here or 10,000 records a month. Knock them out. Okay. No, what happened? We come back and revisit, your KPIs on a weekly basis, look at performance. And it doesn't take long, man. If you have, if you do the setup right, it's not going to take too long. We have an operations meeting every Tuesday. Lead generation jumps in, acquisition jumps in, dispo jumps in. We all, come in, look at the KPIs, look at the scorecard performance, what's happening on the campaigns, what worked last week, what didn't work last week. Come in, boom, and then, knock that out for an hour, and everybody goes back to execution. My team is virtual. So I do have people that come to the office every now and then, but most of them work virtual. So it's not that difficult to delegate if you have the right accountability to go along with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the key. Like you said, the metrics, and then that 6th stage of improving that. So this has been awesome, man. Yeah, you're very, very good at breaking down what could be a big hairy, convoluted thing, and putting into simple steps and saying like, hey, think about it in this conveyor belt fashion. So I appreciate you coming on. Like,
thank you.
Appreciate your time today. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you too? Would love to have our audience connect with you.
Yeah, I'm pretty active on social media. So Instagram, I look at all the DMs, the messages, and all that stuff. Rafael Cortez, CEO, is my handle. You can find me like that on Facebook. I do have a Facebook group. It's REI Wholesaling, just like the website. So if you want to find out about coaching and what I have in terms of, I actually have a free course where I break down the stages in detail, and that's absolutely free, and it's at reiwholesaling.com. So yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. Yeah, we'll link to that. I know we'll have free resources on our end as well. I'll link like we've got our Scaling Your REI ebook and a variety of things linked here too. So Rafael, really, really appreciate the time, man. This was a great conversation. So
thanks so much, man. I appreciate the invite, bro. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And to everyone watching, this is Matt Camp with Deal Machine, and happy deal finding.